Good evening and welcome to the Kuhn Academy, where we're not just learning history, we're making history. All right, we're going to finish our imperialism up with some information on the Spanish-American War. Okay, basically, it's fought in 1898, same year as we annexed Hawaii, although they had very little to do with each other. All right, focus point in Spanish-American War is Cuba. All right, we know Cuba is property of Spain. It had been for many years. America had tried to annex it earlier with something called the Ostend Manifesto. Don't think we talked about this. This was actually right before the Civil War. And it was an attempt by the southern states to annex Cuba so you could add another slave state. But that is in 1856, well before the time period we're talking about. But all eyes are kind of turned to Cuba here in the late 1800s, all right, because there's been some rebellions, all right. There was a rebellion in 1868. That didn't garner too much of our attention because of Reconstruction. Then in 1895, another revolt, all right. This catches our attention a little bit more, especially the sugar producers or sugar manufacturers. A guy named Valeriano Weyler, all right, not the guy in the picture here. The guy in the picture is a little different, but Valeriano Weyler was a general from the Spanish that they had sent over to Cuba, and he had basically rounded up these Cubans that had been rebelling and put them into concentration camps, not death camps, but concentration camps, had beheaded and killed about 200 or 300 rebels, had herded up from the countryside and he put into the cities. Jose Marti is the guy you see in the picture here, and he was kind of the unofficial leader of the Cuban revolt. And he organized some of the Cubans to then attack the U.S. sugar plantations. Now, how does this make any sense? The Cubans are rebelling against the Spanish. All right, so why would they attack our sugar plantations? Well, because our sugar producers were very influential, had the ear of the government, and if their investment was being attacked, they were going to pressure the U.S. to get involved. The U.S. is not going to side with Spain because of what Weyler's doing, and Spain is not one of our allies, so they would intervene in the war, try and keep the peace, and that would help the guerrillas out. Okay, so that's kind of how things begin. Now, how do we find out about it? All right, there's something called yellow journalism that is really taking root in the late 1800s. What this is a form of journalism that exaggerates the truths, sensationalizes things, big headlines, exaggerates stories. So Weyler might have killed 200 Cubans, and a yellow journalism story is going to say that Weyler butchers 3,000 Cubans. All right, just trying to energize the people, get them excited, and call for action. All right, and you had two competing newspapers, one by William Randolph Hearst and the other by Joseph Pulitzer. Now, you might have heard of Joseph Pulitzer. Yes, the Pulitzer Prize. And we have a prize named after a guy that told false stories. Yeah, that's America for you, okay? But these two kind of competed in New York to try and sort of outsell the other one, all right? Now, just to show you how yellow journalism works, in 1895, at the start of the rebellion, they're selling 30,000 copies of the newspaper a day. A couple years later, they're up to 400,000, and at the time of the Spanish-American War, 1 million papers a day. People wanted to read this stuff. People were excited, people were interested, informed, and yellow journalism was working. Okay, what sets things off is in February of 1898, the USS Maine, which had been dispatched there just to keep an eye on the rebellion and the fighting that had been going on in Cuba, it explodes. All right, and this is a yellow journalistic artist rendition of things. Obviously, this doesn't happen, but you can see the sailors flowing through the air, their bodies intact, which of course it wouldn't have been, the blood in the water. This is designed to say, this is horrible, look what the Spanish have done to us, okay? We will find out eventually what really happens, but we're in Havana Harbor, we're in Cuba, a ship explodes, must have been Spain's fault, okay? This is from Arlington National Cemetery in near Washington, D.C., and this is actually the mast of the USS Maine. They took it out of the ground, or out of the harbor where it had sunk, and brought it back and put the names on the monument of all the people that had died there. And then these are the 266 sailors from the USS Maine that were killed. Can't really see close enough, but they're on some of the headstones actually says unknown, which just tells you how devastating the explosion was, that you couldn't identify who was who. All right, so the New York Journal reports the story, and just look at the word. All right, Spanish treachery. All right, Spanish must have been up to something. They planted this bomb to explode the ship to get America out of there. Okay, turned out later the explosion actually occurred inside the ship and went outward when some divers finally got down there to investigate. So we were wrong, essentially, but it gives the president of the country at the time, William McKinley, enough ammunition to want to go to war. Now, simultaneously, while the Maine is exploding, the Philippines are in a rebellion led by a guy named Emilio Aguinaldo. He doesn't like Spanish rule. He has mobilized the Filipinos in the countryside to fight for their independence, and he is asking America for help. You fought against the British for independence. We need your help to get independent from Spain. And America sees this as a golden opportunity because the enemy of my enemy is, yes, you said it, my friend. All right, so Teddy Roosevelt, what role does he play in all this? All right, McKinley's the president at the time, okay, serving his second term, and actually still in his first term. He's elected in 1896. He's the gold bug that opposed free silver. Well, Teddy Roosevelt was the assistant secretary of the Navy. And as I told you before, Teddy's favorite person was Teddy. And what word would he have hated on there? The assistant. Nobody wants to be an assistant to anything, okay? But while this rebellion happens and this explosion in Havana Harbor, Teddy puts the Pacific Fleet on alert. Be ready. Who knows what's going to happen? He's kind of hoping for the war to take place. Now, the reason he's doing this is because the head secretary of the Navy was out of town, and Teddy was acting in kind of his behalf. So he's sort of predicting war before it ever happens. And Admiral Dewey is going to be the leader of the fleet that's going to go in and be ready to take action against the Spanish if need be. All right, now McKinley, incidentally, Teddy Roosevelt at the start of the war went into the White House and made a bold statement during a party that said the president has the backbone of a chocolate eclair. I didn't know chocolate eclairs had backbones, but maybe that's what he was going for. And McKinley had a peace agreement all worked out with Spain. Spain was going to apologize and give reparations to the victims and so on and so forth, okay? But the public was crying for war. Why? Because the newspapers were telling them that the Spanish were doing these atrocious things and that the Spanish were behind this and we should not accept a peace solution. So McKinley's getting pressure from the public. He's in his first term as president. He's doing everything he can to avoid war. However, the House and Senate vote to declare war for the third time in our nation's history. All right, the first two, War of 1812 and Mexican War. And the battle cry became, remember the Maine, to hell with Spain. All right, and we're going to go off to war to avenge the explosion of the Maine. All right, now the war itself, not much. All right, there's a couple naval victories in Cuba, because Teddy put the fleet on alert. They go into into Manila Bay, take over the Spanish Navy there rather quickly. Okay. And a side note is the USS Oregon, after it was successful in Cuba, was going to sail to the Philippines to help out and assist there. And at the time, the USS Oregon had to sail around the coast of South America, okay, down around the Cape Horn, I believe it is, down there, and then sail to the Philippines. Well, by the time it got to the Philippines, the war was over. So let's see. It took us forever to go all the way around South America to get there. Now we have territory in both hemispheres. Maybe we might need a quicker way to get there. We'll see if that comes up or not. All right. So Teddy Roosevelt organizes a group of cavalrymen called the Rough Riders. If you Wikipedia this, you'll probably get a kick out of who was in it. It's like old college football players, American Indians, ex-Confederates, just anybody that wanted to fight. Okay, and it just became a rugged group of cavalrymen. And Teddy Roosevelt leads them up San Juan Hill, which wasn't much of a hill, but he kind of said it was and kind of got himself some accolades. On his way up the hill, he actually saw a dying soldier laying there, and he said, "Isn't this splendid?" That was kind of Teddy's personality. So kind of a goofball, all right? Here you're dying, you don't want somebody saying, "Isn't this splendid?" So Teddy was the leader of the Rough Riders, and he was like a colonel. He wasn't even a general of this group, but he wanted to be part of the war. He quits the Naval Department because he wants to be in battle as a soldier, kind of carrying on this soldier tradition from the Civil War and Revolutionary War, things like that. All right, the casualties. Don't blink, you're going to miss it. There were less than 2,500 dead and wounded in the Spanish-American War. Of that, 385 die in battle. Okay, there are very few casualties in the Spanish-American War. Most of those died of disease, okay, from that. All right, some of your results. Go through these pretty quick because I know you're getting tired of listening to me. Cuba is going to be granted its independence, but there's going to be something amended to that independence called the Platt Amendment, which basically says you're independent, but we can keep an eye on you, and if we don't like what's going on, we can get involved. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, Puerto Rico, Guam, The Philippines are all ceded or given to the United States. So when you cede something, you give that property to them. Would be a great word for the word wall for you non-Taylor people out there. Okay, so when you cede something, so that happens with territory. You can annex it where you take it, or it can be ceded to you where they give it to you. Okay. $20 million was given by America to the Philippines, or to Spain for the Philippines. So we won the war, but we also paid for the territory, kind of being the good victor there, if you will. And there will be a Philippine insurrection that will follow that will be much more bloody than the Spanish-American War, and doesn't get talked about too much in our history books. All right, some of the consequences. All right, Spanish Empire is no more. Okay, they don't even have the money to send their ambassadors home. They have to borrow money from the United States so they can have a return trip back after the treaty is negotiated. And it is the Treaty of Paris, one of 3 Treaty of Parises we need to know. You can ask me tomorrow about the other 2. The U.S. now is involved in the Orient, or at least in Asia. Okay, Philippines is not the prize. The big prize is China. Okay, you're going to read about the open door policy next week. All right, this puts the U.S. on the map as a world power. They now have territory in Asia. They have territory in South America. They are a player in the game of imperialism now. Okay, it's why this war is so crucial. Not for what happens as far as deaths and battles and things, but just for the fact that America now has an empire. And this unites the North and South. Okay, this is only 30 years removed from the Civil War. They're no longer fighting, hating each other. They actually unify. There were some Confederates and Union soldiers, very old, but fighting together in the battle. All right, that concludes today's lesson of the Kuhn Academy. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great evening, and we will talk tomorrow about some of the results of this and watch some videos from the President series. All right, have a great night, and remember, we're not just learning history, we're making history.